The moment Lewis Hamilton crossed the line in 6th place in Montreal, the scoreboard didn't tell the real story. It wasn't the position that had everyone in the paddock buzzing. It was what happened in the minutes after the race that signalled something deeper was unfolding. As George Russell celebrated his win, and as the cameras followed Max Verstappen's scowl in P2, Hamilton's radio crackled to life with a message that cut through the noise. "Awesome job, Lewis. That was phenomenal driving given everything." The tone wasn't technical, it wasn't strategic, it was personal, laced with something rare over team radio: admiration. Because what the public didn't see was that Hamilton had driven nearly the entire race, with a car wounded from lap 13, 20 points of downforce lost, brake instability, a groundhog hit. And yet, he didn't just survive, he hunted. And the way he hunted wasn't just technical, it was psychological. He knew how much the car had lost, but he also knew how much was still left in him. And in that calculus, Hamilton found a new edge. Not in raw speed, but in relentless consistency. Every corner was calculated. Every braking zone was a compromise-turned advantage. He wasn't just saving tyres or managing energy, he was performing surgery at 300 km/h. What made that message more than a compliment was what it implied. Hamilton had turned a damaged SF25 into a weapon of defence, chasing down McLarens, fending off Alonso, and keeping the car on the edge without pushing it over. The telemetry told a story of adaptation. Hamilton lifted earlier into turn 3, braked later into the hairpin, and shifted the brake balance mid-corner to adjust on instinct. And through it all, radio silence. For nearly 20 laps, Hamilton said nothing. No feedback, no questioning strategy, just focus. And in Formula One, silence is rarely nothing. It's often everything. When a driver stops communicating, they're either lost or locked in. Hamilton was the latter, and the engineers knew it. That's why the second radio message, even more quietly spoken, landed with such weight. "You were brilliant, thank you." Because brilliance in F1 isn't always about overtaking or fastest laps. Sometimes it's about endurance. And Hamilton, in that moment, showed the paddock that experience can overcome physics. That instinct can replace what data says is impossible. He wasn't meant to finish where he did. And yet, there he was. 6th on paper, but first in resilience. But even as Mercedes whispered praise, Red Bull shouted protest. Minutes after the flag, their team lodged a formal complaint against George Russell for alleged misconduct behind the safety car. It wasn't the first time. They'd done the same in Miami, same target, same claim. But the stewards weren't moved then, and they weren't moved now. Which begs the question, why keep doing it? The answer is psychological. It's not about winning the protest, it's about breaking rhythm, creating noise, disrupting Mercedes from within. Because while the official complaint named Russell, the subtext pointed to Hamilton. Red Bull saw a threat not just in raw pace, but in experience. Verstappen may have been chasing Russell, but Hamilton, he was managing. The gaps, the pace, the chaos, like a conductor in control of the storm. Red Bull didn't fear legality, they feared control slipping away. And that control, or loss of it, is what keeps champions up at night. When a team like Red Bull sees their finely tuned machine destabilized not by hardware or software, but by human unpredictability, that's when pressure mounts. Because it's not about rules anymore, it's about momentum. And Mercedes in that moment had all of it. It's no coincidence that during those tense laps under the safety car, Verstappen's tone changed. He wasn't just questioning strategy, he was reacting to something else: order. Russell slowed just enough to frustrate, just enough to block momentum behind. But behind Russell, there was Hamilton. And he wasn't pushing, he was measuring. This wasn't just team dynamics, it was a layered chess match. Because Hamilton, knowing his car was wounded, shifted roles from predator to protector, not for Russell, but for data, for damage control, for leverage. And it worked. Verstappen couldn't close, Red Bull couldn't disrupt, and Mercedes, they walked away with a win, a fastest lap, and a message. A message not just for the grid, but for the championship narrative. That Mercedes, long seen as fractured, hesitant, even aging, could still orchestrate strategy with surgical precision. That in a moment of chaos, their drivers weren't scrambling, they were sinking. That while Red Bull scrambled for clarity, Mercedes delivered coherence. But while Hamilton played guardian on track, Ferrari sent a very different signal off it. In the final stint, a radio call to Hamilton crackled through: "Maintain current pace, we're gathering data." Harmless words on the surface, but coded in context. Because Leclerc ahead was on worn tyres, his delta slipping, his grip fading. And yet, Hamilton was told to hold, not attack, not challenge, hold. Insiders say it was about tyre life, about testing brake behaviour under load, but Hamilton's silence said more. He complied. No push, no protest, just precision. He logged the lap times, adjusted as instructed. And that obedience, it wasn't compliance. It was cold defiance, a message to the pit wall: I'm watching, I'm listening, and I won't forget. Because trust, once lost in a team like Ferrari, is not easily rebuilt. And Hamilton has played the long game before. He knows how internal politics work, and he knows when the chessboard isn't being set for both players equally. The politics behind that call speak volumes. Because while Leclerc finished ahead on paper, Hamilton drove the more compromised race. Damaged floor, brake instability. And still, he was faster in clean air. The body language in Parc Fermé told the real story. Leclerc's smile was a little too wide. Hamilton's handshake a little too cold. This wasn't rivalry. This was tension disguised as teamwork. And Ferrari team principal Fred Vasseur? He stood between them, literally, during the post-race debrief. Not a coincidence, a necessity. Because right now, Ferrari is balancing two alphas. And it's only a matter of time before one bites. The question is, who will bite first? Leclerc, the golden child of Maranello, with years of loyalty behind him, or Hamilton, the calculating veteran who didn't come to place second? Because if Montreal was a test, the next few races are the exam. And the pit wall, they're being graded too. Meanwhile, the next generation is rising. Kimi Antonelli, Mercedes' golden prospect, stood on his first F1 podium in Montreal. Clean race, strong pace, minimal errors. But what stood out wasn't his performance, it was the timing. Because while Lewis battled damage and Russell battled Verstappen, Antonelli shadowed both with quiet precision. And when the race ended, it was Hamilton's engineer, not Antonelli's, who got the most airtime. The subtext, clear. Mercedes respects Antonelli, but they still revere Hamilton. Yet behind the scenes, sources say Toto Wolff sees Antonelli as more than a future bet. He's leverage, a reminder that Mercedes has life after Lewis. And Hamilton, ever the tactician, knows it. The camera didn't need to linger on Antonelli to make the point. The garage dynamic said it all. The torch isn't being passed yet, but it's being polished. Max Verstappen's second-place finish should have been a win. On pace, on paper, he had the tools. But instead, he left Montreal rattled. Not because of strategy, not because of pace, but because Mercedes, for the first time in months, looked unified. Russell was unleashed. Hamilton was focused. And the car, even with its flaws, delivered. Verstappen's radio rants weren't frustration. They were fear. Of losing control. Of a championship tightening. Of rivals learning faster than Red Bull can adapt. And in a season built on dominance, Montreal was a crack in the armour. A moment that could evolve into a pattern. Because champions don't just fear defeat. They fear patterns of defeat. And Verstappen, for the first time in a long time, looked like a man searching for answers in places he once found dominance. The power dynamics have shifted. Hamilton is no longer chasing. He's waiting, watching, and now calculating. The man who once dominated with outright speed is now mastering the psychological war. Ferrari should be worried, not just because their car isn't ready, but because their garage isn't. Red Bull should be watching, not because of Russell's speed, but because of Hamilton's silence. Montreal didn't just rearrange the points table, it redrew the battle lines. And the next move, it won't be on the track. It will be in the strategy room, the team meetings, the politics. Because Formula One has always been a game of speed. But now, it's a game of power. And Lewis Hamilton just reminded everyone, he still knows how to play it better than anyone. And this time, he's not just playing to win races, he's playing to rewrite the pecking order. On the grid, in the garage, and in the legacy books of Formula One history.